The alarm screamed across the Volani homeworld as another star system went dark on the tactical display. Theronix pressed her four-fingered hands against the cool metal of the command console and tried not to show her fear to the other council members. 17 systems, 17 entire worlds consumed in less than 2 months. The Drakmar have taken the Kalani mining colonies, reported her military advisor, his blue-scaled face pale with exhaustion. No survivors detected. The bioships are already moving toward the next system. Theronix looked at the massive display showing their territory. Red dots marked the dead systems, spreading like a disease across the star map. The Drakmar swarm moved like a plague of living ships, each one hungry and growing larger, with every world they consumed. They ate everything: the people, the animals, the plants, even the bacteria in the soil. They left behind empty rocks, floating in space. "How long until they reach us?" she asked, though she already knew the answer would bring no comfort. 6 weeks, maybe 7, if we evacuate the outer planets and make them fight for every world. 6 weeks. The Volani Republic had existed for over 3,000 years. They had built beautiful cities, created amazing art, and lived in peace with their neighbors. Now they had 6 weeks before it all ended. What about the other species? The Galactic Council? Her advisor pulled up another display showing the responses they had received to their calls for help. The Zenthari are sending medical supplies and refugee transport ships. The Mollusk Confederacy is offering to take 50,000 of our people as settlers. The Ethereal Collective is providing food aid. Theronix felt her heart sink. Aid packages and refugee camps. The galaxy was preparing to watch the Volani die and then clean up the remains. No one was offering to fight. "There is one more option," her advisor said quietly. "We could send a signal to the entire galaxy. Not just the council members, but everyone, even the restricted species." Theronix knew what he meant. The Deathworlders, the species from planets so dangerous that most civilized beings couldn't even visit them without dying. They were considered too violent, too unpredictable for normal diplomatic contact. But they were also the only ones who might actually fight. "Do it," she said. "Send the signal everywhere." The transmission burst out from the Volani homeworld carrying a simple message. "We are the Volani Republic. The Drakmar swarm is destroying our people. We need military aid. Anyone who can help, please respond." The message traveled through space, at faster than light speed, reaching thousands of worlds across the galaxy. Most governments that received it filed it away with the other aid requests and scheduled committee meetings to discuss possible responses. But one planet was different. Admiral Hyunsik was drinking coffee in his office on Luna Base when the message arrived. He was a tall man with gray hair and tired eyes, someone who had spent 30 years keeping Earth's military ready for threats that might never come. When his communication officer brought him the Volani transmission, everything changed. He watched the attached video files in silence. The Drakmar bioships looked like massive insects made of metal and flesh, each one the size of a small moon. They swarmed around planets, landing on the surface and consuming everything they found. The people of entire cities disappeared into feeding chambers, their screams cut short as they became food for the growing ships. "How many ships do they have?" Hyunsik asked Captain Sujin, his tactical officer. She was a small woman with sharp eyes and a mind that turned every problem into numbers. Conservative estimate, 40 billion bioships of various sizes. They reproduce by consuming biomass, so every world they take makes them stronger. And the Volani? Maybe 3,000 military vessels, designed for patrol duty and small conflicts. They've never fought a war like this. Hyunsik stood and walked to the large window overlooking Earth. The blue planet turned slowly below them, beautiful and peaceful. But he knew what lay beneath that calm surface. 6 billion humans who had survived ice ages, plagues, world wars, and asteroid impacts. His people had fought for every scrap of progress, earned every achievement through blood and determination. "What are the other species doing?" he asked. Sujin pulled up the diplomatic reports. The usual: committees, aid packages, refugee programs. The Galactic Council is debating whether military intervention would violate the non-interference treaty. How long do they need to debate? The preliminary discussions are scheduled to last 6 months. Hyun-sik laughed, but there was no humor in it. 6 months of talking while an entire species got eaten alive. This was exactly why humanity stayed out of galactic politics. Too much talking, not enough action. He pressed the communication button on his desk. Get me Fleet Command. Priority 1 authorization. Within minutes, he was connected to every major human military base in the solar system and beyond. Faces appeared on his screen. Admirals, generals, ship captains, all of them looking tired but alert. These were people who understood that when something needed doing, you did it fast and you did it right. You've all seen the Villani transmission, Hyun-sik said without introduction. The Drakmar swarm is wiping out an entire civilization, and the galaxy is forming committees to discuss it. I'm calling for full mobilization. Every ship, every weapon, every soldier we can spare. Admiral Park from the Mars Defense Fleet spoke first. Sir, this isn't our fight. The Villani aren't even allied with us. They're people being murdered by monsters, Hyun-sik replied. That makes it our fight. Captain Lee from the Jupiter mining platform raised her hand. What about the other species? Shouldn't we coordinate with them? Soo-jin answered that one. The Galactic Council will spend months debating while people die. By the time they decide to act, there won't be anyone left to save. Hyun-sik looked at each face on the screen. These were his people, soldiers and officers who had sworn to protect humanity. But humanity had grown beyond just Earth now. They were part of something bigger, and that meant protecting others when they couldn't protect themselves. Here's what we're going to do, he said. Every available ship reports to staging areas within 72 hours. Full combat loadouts, maximum ammunition, extended deployment supplies. We're going to hit the Drakmar so hard they'll think a star exploded. The other officers began asking practical questions, logistics, supply lines, communication protocols. But Hyun-sik was already thinking ahead to the fight itself. Humanity had never faced an enemy like the Drakmar, but they had faced extinction before. And every time they had survived by being more stubborn, more determined, and more willing to do whatever it took than anyone expected. The galaxy was about to learn what humans did when someone threatened innocent people. They didn't send aid, packages, or hold committee meetings. They sent everything they had and made sure the problem never happened again. Earth had not seen mobilization like this since the Unification Wars 2 centuries ago. Within hours of Admiral Hyun-sik's order, every human world buzzed with activity. Shipyards that built cargo vessels started welding armor plating and weapon mounts. Factories that made farming equipment switched to manufacturing missiles and ammunition. Even civilian transport ships were being fitted with military gear. Commander Dong-woo stood on the observation deck of Titan Station, watching the largest fleet in human history take shape. Massive dreadnoughts hung in space like metal mountains, their hulls bristling with enough firepower to crack planets. Sleek destroyers darted between the larger ships like hunting wolves. Carrier vessels loaded with thousands of fighters prepared for the long journey to Villani space. It's beautiful in a terrifying way, said Lieutenant So-young, joining him at the window. She was young for a fighter pilot, barely 25, but her scores in combat simulation were the highest in her class. My grandmother used to tell me stories about the old wars when humans fought each other. She said the worst part wasn't the violence, it was how good we were at it. Dong-woo nodded. He had studied military history, knew about the great battles that shaped humanity. Humans didn't just fight. They turned fighting into an art form. They studied strategy, improved tactics, and built weapons that could destroy anything they faced. Other species fought when they had to. Humans fought like they were born for it. Sir, a communication officer approached them. Admiral Hyun-sik wants to see you in the briefing room. Something about the alien response to our mobilization. The briefing room was crowded with officers from every branch of the military. Admiral Hyun-sik stood at the front, looking grim. Behind him, a large screen showed diplomatic messages from across the galaxy. The other species are getting nervous, he began without introduction. Apparently, they weren't expecting us to respond quite so enthusiastically. Captain Soo-jin stepped forward with a datapad. We've received formal protests from 12 different species. They're concerned about human military expansion. The Galactic Council has demanded we limit our response to appropriate levels of aid. What do they consider appropriate? Asked Colonel Minho from his seat near the back. 50 ships maximum. Medical supplies and refugee transport only. No weapons of mass destruction. No planetary bombardment capabilities. No extended military presence. The room fell silent. Every human officer understood what those limits meant. They would arrive just in time to watch the Volani die and maybe rescue a few survivors. It was the kind of half measure that looked good in diplomatic reports but accomplished nothing. What's our actual fleet size? Hyun-sik asked. 3,200 combat vessels, Soo-jin replied. Plus support ships, that brings us to over 4,000 total. Some of the younger officers whistled softly. It was 8 times larger than what the aliens considered acceptable, and more firepower than most species had in their entire military. Sir, Lieutenant Commander Young-ho spoke up. He was humanity's liaison to the Galactic Council, one of the few humans who understood alien politics. We could face serious diplomatic consequences, trade sanctions, territory restrictions, maybe even military action against us. Hyun-sik looked around the room, studying the faces of his officers. These were people who had dedicated their lives to protecting others. They came from a planet where everything tried to kill you. The weather, the animals, the diseases, even the plants. They had survived by being tougher than their environment and more determined than their enemies. Captain Park, he called to one of his ship commanders. How many Volani civilians are we talking about? Current population estimates put them at around 8 billion people, sir. 8 billion people who will be dead in 6 weeks if we follow the Galactic Council's guidelines. Hyun-sik's voice carried across the room clearly. How many of you have families? Every hand in the room went up. How many of you would want someone to debate diplomatic niceties while your family was being eaten alive? The hands stayed up, but now they were clenched into fists. The galaxy is full of species who think problems can be solved with committee meetings and carefully worded resolutions, Hyun-sik continued. But we know better. Some problems can only be solved with violence, and the Drakmar are definitely one of those problems. Major Hyojin, commander of the Marine Corps, stood up. Sir, what about the other species if they try to stop us? Then they'll learn why Earth is classified as a death world, Hyun-sik replied. But I don't think it will come to that. Most of them are too scared of us to actually fight. They'll complain and file protests, but when we save the Volani, they'll quietly pretend they supported us all along. The Admiral moved to the tactical display, showing the route to Volani space. Here's what's going to happen. We jump in 3 waves. The first wave engages the Drakmar fleet and draws their attention. The second wave hits their supply lines and breeding ships. The third wave consists of our heaviest vessels. They're going to make sure nothing survives. What about prisoners? Sir? Asked Captain Lee. Soo-jin answered that question. Intelligence reports indicate the Drakmar don't take prisoners and can't surrender. They're a hive mind focused entirely on consumption and reproduction. This isn't a war, it's pest control on a galactic scale. The briefing continued for 2 more hours covering logistics, communication protocols, and emergency procedures. But the real decision had been made in the first 5 minutes. Humanity was going to war, and they were going to win so completely that no one would ever question their methods again. As the officers filed out to return to their ships, Dongwoo caught up with Admiral Hyun-sik. Sir, can I ask you something? Go ahead. Why are we really doing this? I mean, beyond just saving the Volani. What's the real reason? Hyun-sik stopped walking and looked out at the fleet through a nearby window. Thousands of ships floated in space, each one representing humanity's determination to never back down from a fight. Because this is what we are, Commander. Every species in the galaxy has their specialty. The Ethereals are great philosophers. The Xanthari are amazing artists. The Mollusk Confederacy builds beautiful cities. But humans? We're the ones who stand between the darkness and everything worth protecting. He turned to face Dongwoo directly. The galaxy doesn't understand us because they've never had to fight for survival the way we have. They think violence is always wrong. that every problem has a peaceful solution. But some things in this universe are just evil, and evil only understands one language: force. Overwhelming force, Yunsik corrected. When we're done with the Drakmar, every predator species in the galaxy will know that there's something worse than them out there, something that will hunt them down and destroy them completely if they threaten innocent people. As Dongwu walked back to his ship, he thought about his commander's words. The other species saw humans as violent and unpredictable. Maybe they were right. But sometimes the galaxy needed something violent and unpredictable to keep the real monsters in check. The fleet finished its preparations and prepared to jump to hyperspace. Behind them, Earth continued its transformation into a war machine, ready to support the largest military operation in human history. Ahead of them waited an enemy that had never lost a battle. The Drakmar were about to learn why that didn't matter when they faced Deathworlders. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of Volani territory like a metallic storm. Admiral Hyunsik's flagship, the Indomitable, led the formation with its hull scarred from a dozen previous battles. Behind it stretched a line of warships that seemed to go on forever. Dreadnoughts, cruisers, destroyers, and carriers, all bristling with weapons that other species considered excessive. "Sir," Captain Sujin reported from her station, "long-range sensors are picking up the Drakmar fleet. They're bigger than expected." On the main display, space seemed to writhe with living ships. The Drakmar bio-vessels looked like massive insects crossed with spacecraft, their hulls pulsing with organic rhythms. They moved in perfect coordination, thousands of ships acting as a single organism. At the center of the formation, the largest bioships were easily 50 kilometers long, their surface covered with feeding tubes and breeding chambers. "How many?" Hyunsik asked, though he kept his voice calm for the benefit of his crew. "Conservative count puts them at over 60 billion individual vessels," Sujin replied. "They've grown since the intelligence reports." Lieutenant Commander Wu Jin, the youngest ship captain in the fleet, spoke up from his position near the tactical display. "Sir, we're outnumbered 20,000 to 1. Yunsik smiled grimly. "Good. That means we won't have to worry about hitting our own ships." He activated the fleet communication system. "All vessels, this is Admiral Hyunsik. Today we're going to remind the galaxy why predators fear humans. Attack Formation Alpha 7. Target the largest bioships first." The human fleet spread out into attack formation with the precision of a machine. Each ship knew its role. Each captain understood the plan. They had trained for this kind of fight their entire careers. Overwhelming odds, no backup, everything depending on their ability to hit harder and faster than anyone expected. Captain Minho commanded the heavy cruiser Retribution as it moved into position. His ship was typical of human military design, built like a fortress, armed like a battleship, and crewed by people who thought running away was worse than dying. The Retribution carried enough nuclear missiles to sterilize a continent, plus energy weapons that could cut through any known armor. "Captain," his weapons officer reported, "the Drakmar are changing formation. They're moving to surround us." Minho nodded. The aliens were trying to use their superior numbers to engulf the human fleet. It was a smart tactic against most enemies. Unfortunately for them, humans didn't fight like most enemies. "Fire everything," Minho ordered. The Retribution unleashed its full armament in a single devastating salvo. Nuclear missiles streaked toward the largest Drakmar bioships, while plasma cannons carved burning lines through their formations. The other human vessels followed suit, turning space into a storm of explosions and energy beams. The Drakmar had never faced weapons like these. Their bioships were designed to absorb conventional energy attacks and regenerate from physical damage. But human weapons weren't conventional. Nuclear explosions vaporized entire sections of bioships faster than they could heal. Kinetic rounds punched through their hulls at significant fractions of light speed, creating wounds that couldn't regenerate because there was nothing left to heal. "They're trying to board us," shouted the tactical officer aboard the destroyer Swift Justice. Drakmar organisms were launching themselves from damaged bioships, attempting to attach to human vessels and bore through their hulls. Captain Ji-Wan, commander of the Swift Justice, had been expecting this. Activate hull defenses. The human ships had been designed with biological warfare in mind. Their hulls were lined with electric grids, chemical dispensers, and automated defense turrets. The Drakmar organisms found themselves electrocuted, poisoned, and shot before they could even reach the armor plating. But the real surprise came when the Drakmar tried their ultimate weapon, biological infection. They launched specialized spores designed to infiltrate enemy ships through air systems and convert the crew into food sources. The spores penetrated the human vessels and began their deadly work. Nothing happened. Dr. Yun-Su, monitoring the battle from her laboratory ship, smiled as she watched the readings. The biological countermeasures are working perfectly. The Drakmar spores can't affect human physiology. We're too different from their usual prey. The truth was even simpler than that. Humans had evolved on a planet where everything was trying to kill them with toxins, diseases, and parasites. Their immune systems were so aggressive that Drakmar bioweapons couldn't even survive contact with human blood. As the battle continued, it became clear that this wasn't a fight. It was extermination. The Drakmar's advantages meant nothing against an enemy that had prepared for exactly this kind of threat. Their numbers were useless when human weapons could destroy hundreds of bioships with each shot. Their regeneration was meaningless when nothing was left to regenerate from. Colonel Hyojin led the first boarding action against a damaged Drakmar command vessel. Her Marines wore armor that looked like metal shells with glowing eyes, and they carried weapons that could punch through steel walls. The Drakmar organisms inside the bioship tried to swarm them with tooth and claw. It was like watching insects attack a tank. Flame units, clear that breeding chamber, Hyojin ordered calmly. Demolition team, plant charges on the neural center. Medical, make sure nothing survives to reproduce. The Marines worked with mechanical efficiency, methodically exterminating every Drakmar organism they found. They had studied the enemy, learned their biology, and prepared for every possible encounter. The Drakmar fought with the desperation of cornered animals, but desperation meant nothing against superior weapons and tactics. "Colonel," one of her sergeants reported, "we're finding something strange in the lower levels. The Drakmar seem to be afraid of us." Hyojin wasn't surprised. The Drakmar were a hive mind that had conquered through overwhelming numbers and biological advantages. They had never faced an enemy that was immune to their weapons and treated their numbers as a target-rich environment rather than a threat. From the bridge of the Indomitable, Admiral Hyun-Sik watched the battle unfold with professional satisfaction. The Drakmar were throwing everything they had at the human fleet, but it wasn't enough. Human ships that should have been overwhelmed were carving through bio-ship formations like knives through paper. "Sir," Captain Sujin reported, "we're receiving communications from other galactic species. They're concerned about our tactics." Hyun-Sik checked the diplomatic channels. Species across the galaxy were watching the battle and expressing shock at human methods. The ethereal collective was horrified by the excessive violence. The Zenthari were filing formal complaints about disproportionate response. Even the Villani, who were being saved by human intervention, seemed disturbed by the efficiency of the slaughter. "Patch me through to the Galactic Communication Network," Hyun-Sik ordered. "Open channel to all species." His image appeared on screens across the galaxy as he spoke from his command chair. "This is Admiral Hyun-Sik of the Terran Defense Fleet. We are currently engaged in pest control operations in the Villani system. To those species expressing concern about our methods, I want to make something very clear. The Drakmar are not enemies to be defeated. They are a plague to be eliminated. When you face a virus that wants to consume every living thing in the galaxy, you don't negotiate with it. You destroy it completely." He paused, letting his words sink in. "The Drakmar have never faced an opponent like humanity, because there has never been an opponent like humanity. We are the product of a world that tried to kill us every day for millions of years. We survived because we learned to be more dangerous than anything that hunted us." The transmission cut out as another wave of Drakmar bioships attempted a desperate attack on the human fleet. They died just as quickly as the others. their biological advantages useless against an enemy that had prepared for biological warfare since before they reached the stars. The battle was almost over, but Admiral Hyun-sik knew the real war was just beginning. The galaxy had just learned what humans could do when they decided something needed to die. Some species would be grateful for the protection, others would be terrified by the implications. Both reactions were perfectly reasonable. The Villani homeworld was saved, but Admiral Hyun-sik knew the job was only half finished. Driving the Drakmar away from populated systems would just mean they would return later, stronger and hungrier. There was only one solution that would permanently protect innocent species from this threat: complete extinction. "Sir," Captain Sujin reported from her tactical station, "long-range scouts have located the primary Drakmar breeding facilities in the Dark Star Nebula. Intelligence estimates there are over 300 spawning worlds, each one producing millions of new bioships every month." Hyun-sik studied the tactical display showing the nebula's location. It was far from any inhabited systems, hidden in a region of space that most civilized species avoided. The perfect place for parasites to multiply without interference. "What's the fleet status?" 96% operational. We've lost 43 vessels, with another 112 requiring repairs. But our weapons manufacturing ships have been working around the clock. We actually have more ammunition now than when we started. That was typically human. Other species would need months to resupply after a major battle. Humans built their fleets to be self-sustaining war machines that grew stronger the longer they fought. "Split the fleet into hunter-killer groups," Hyun-sik ordered. "I want every Drakmar nest, every spawning ground, every trace of their presence eliminated. No survivors, no exceptions." Captain Sung-ho received command of Battle Group Alpha, 12 heavy cruisers designed for deep space operations. His target was a cluster of spawning worlds in the outer rim of the nebula. As his ships approached the first world, he could see the surface writhing with Drakmar activity. Massive biostructures that looked like twisted cities, all connected by pulsing organic tubes. "Sir," his science officer reported, "bioscans indicate approximately 50 billion Drakmar organisms on the surface. They seem to be in various stages of development: larvae, juveniles, mature forms ready for space travel." Seung-ho nodded grimly. This was what the Drakmar did between attacks on civilized worlds. They found empty planets and turned them into breeding grounds, producing the next generation of bioships that would spread their plague across the galaxy. "Orbital bombardment protocol," he ordered. "I want nothing left alive down there." The human ships opened fire with weapons designed for planetary sterilization. Nuclear missiles crashed into the surface, vaporizing entire biostructures in balls of superheated plasma. Kinetic bombardment rounds struck with the force of asteroids, creating craters that glowed with molten rock. Energy beams swept across the surface like giant cutting tools, slicing through anything they touched. The planet burned. Meanwhile, Captain Ji-won led Battle Group Beta against the Drakmar's mobile breeding fleets. These were massive bioships that served as traveling factories, consuming asteroids and space debris to create new organisms. They were heavily defended and designed to flee if threatened. Unfortunately for them, human ships were faster. "Target their propulsion systems first," Ji-won ordered, as her destroyers closed in on the fleeing bioships. "I want them dead in space, before they can escape." The chase lasted 6 hours and covered 3 star systems. The Drakmar bioships tried every evasive maneuver in their arsenal, but human tactical computers could predict their movements, and human engines could match their speed. One by one, the breeding ships were crippled and destroyed. Dr. Yoon-soo, working aboard the research vessel Discovery, had developed something special for this phase of the operation. Her team had created a biological weapon specifically designed to target Drakmar DNA, a virus that would attack their cellular structure and prevent regeneration. "It's poetic justice," she explained to Admiral Hyun-sik during a secure communication. "They use biological warfare against everyone else. Now they get to see how it feels when someone does it better." The virus was deployed on every world the Drakmar had touched. It spread through their biostructures like wildfire, breaking down their organic technology and killing any organisms it contacted. Within days, entire breeding worlds went silent as the plague consumed its creators. But the other galactic species were not happy with human methods. "This is genocide," protested Ambassador Theclon of the Ethereal Collective during an emergency session of the Galactic Council. "The humans are systematically exterminating an entire species." Ambassador Young Ho, representing humanity at the council meeting, stood calmly at the speaker's podium. He was a diplomat, but he was also human, which meant he understood the difference between mercy and stupidity. "You're absolutely right," he said, surprising everyone in the chamber. "We are committing genocide against the Drakmar. We are hunting down every single member of their species and killing them. We are destroying their breeding grounds, their food supplies, and their technology. We will not stop until they are extinct." The chamber erupted in shocked murmurs. Species that prided themselves on their civilized nature had never heard anyone openly admit to genocide, much less defend it. "The question you need to ask yourselves," Young Ho continued, "is whether you prefer live Drakmar or live Villani. Because you can't have both. The Drakmar are a parasitic species that exists only to consume other life forms. They cannot be negotiated with, reformed, or relocated. They can only be eliminated." "But surely there must be an alternative," protested the Zenthari representative. "Perhaps containment or forced evolution or—" 17 star systems," Young Ho interrupted. "That's how many civilized worlds the Drakmar consumed before we intervened. Billions of people were eaten alive while this council debated alternatives. How many more billions should die while you search for a solution that doesn't require violence?" Back in the Dark Star Nebula, the extermination continued with mechanical efficiency. Commander Dongwu led a specialized task force equipped with deep space scanning equipment, hunting for any Drakmar survivors who might have escaped the initial purge. "Contacted grid reference 77 Alpha," reported his sensor operator. "Single bioship heavily damaged, drifting near the nebula's edge." Dongwu studied the readings. The bioship was barely functional, its organic systems failing. It posed no immediate threat, but that wasn't the point. As long as even one Drakmar survived, the species could potentially rebuild. "Destroy it," he ordered. The lone bioship died in a brief flash of plasma fire, taking with it any hope of Drakmar survival. It was a small moment in a vast campaign, but it represented everything the human military had become: thorough, ruthless, and absolutely committed to completing whatever mission they accepted. Lieutenant Boram, monitoring communications aboard the fleet flagship, intercepted alien discussions comparing humans to the Drakmar themselves. Some species were saying that both groups were dangerous parasites that threatened galactic peace. The comparison bothered some of the younger officers who had joined the military to protect innocent people. Admiral Hyun-sik addressed these concerns during a fleet-wide broadcast. "I know some of you have heard the comparisons between us and the Drakmar. Let me explain the difference. The Drakmar consume indiscriminately. They eat everything they encounter because that's their nature. But humans choose our targets. We only destroy those who prey upon the innocent." He paused, looking directly into the camera. "Yes, we are capable of terrible violence. Yes, we can exterminate entire species when necessary. But we use that capability to protect those who cannot protect themselves. The day we start consuming innocent people for food is the day you should fear us. Until then, fear the things we hunt." The campaign in the Dark Star Nebula lasted 3 weeks. When it was over, the Drakmar were extinct, not just defeated or driven away, but completely eliminated from the galaxy. Every bioship destroyed, every breeding ground sterilized, every trace of their organic technology reduced to ash. The other galactic species struggled to understand what they had witnessed. For the first time in their recorded history, a threat that seemed unstoppable had been not just defeated, but entirely erased from existence. The humans had accomplished something that most civilizations considered impossible, but Admiral Hyun-sik knew this was just the beginning. Intelligence reports indicated that the Drakmar weren't the only predator species in unexplored space. There were other threats out there. Machine intelligences, energy beings, things that made the Drakmar look friendly by comparison. His response to this information would define humanity's role in the galaxy for generations to come. Then we better keep the fleet ready. The last Drakmar bioship died in the fires of its own making, consumed by the biological weapon that Dr. Yun-Su had created from their own genetic material. Captain Su-Jin watched the readings from her command station aboard the Indomitable as the final traces of the Drakmar swarm winked out of existence. "Confirm total elimination," Admiral Hyun-Sik ordered, though his voice showed no satisfaction. This had been necessary work, not something to celebrate. "All scanning complete, sir. No Drakmar biosignatures detected anywhere in the galaxy. The species is extinct." In 6 months, humanity had accomplished what the rest of the galaxy considered impossible. They had faced an enemy that had terrorized civilized space for centuries and eliminated it completely. Not defeated, not driven away, extinct, but Admiral Hyun-Sik knew the real work was just beginning. Intelligence reports from deep space scouts were already coming in, describing other threats that lurked in unexplored regions. Machine intelligences that consumed entire star systems to build themselves larger bodies. Energy beings that fed on the life force of entire planets. Parasitic entities that made the Drakmar look gentle by comparison. "Sir," Captain Su-Jin approached his command chair with a datapad. "Fleet Command is requesting orders for demobilization." "Where should we send the ships?" Hyun-Sik looked at the tactical display showing human vessels scattered across former Drakmar territory. 3,000 ships, each one crewed by people who had proven they could face any horror the universe produced and emerge victorious. "We're not demobilizing," he said quietly. "Set up permanent patrol routes through this entire region. I want early warning stations at every major hyperspace junction. If something like the Drakmar shows up again, I want to know about it before they reach inhabited space." Commander Dongwu was assigned to establish the first permanent human military base outside Sol system. The location was a dead world in what used to be Drakmar space, perfect for hosting the massive supply depots and repair facilities needed to support deep space operations. "Are you sure about this, sir?" Dongwu asked during his final briefing. "The other species are already nervous about our military presence. A permanent base this far from human space might push them over the edge." "Let them be nervous," Hyun-Sik replied. "Nervous species don't start wars they can't finish. Besides, we're not here to conquer anyone. We're here to make sure nothing, like the Drakmar, ever threatens innocent people again." The Galactic Council, meanwhile, was struggling to deal with the new reality. For thousands of years they had maintained peace through careful diplomacy and the assumption that most species were fundamentally reasonable. The Drakmar had challenged that assumption. Humanity had shattered it completely. "We cannot allow one species to appoint itself as the galaxy's military authority," insisted Council Leader Vexhai during an emergency session. "The humans have demonstrated dangerous levels of aggression and a disturbing willingness to use extreme violence." Ambassador Young-ho stood to address the council, his expression calm but his eyes cold. "You're absolutely right to be concerned. We are dangerous, aggressive, and willing to use extreme violence when necessary. The question is, would you rather have us on your side or hunting you?" The chamber fell silent. It wasn't a threat. It was a statement of fact. Humanity had just demonstrated the ability to eliminate any threat they chose to target. Every species in the galaxy now had to decide whether they wanted to be protected by humans or threatened by them. "What do you want from us?" asked the Villani representative Tharonix, who had sent the original distress signal that started everything. "Nothing," Young-ho replied, surprising everyone. "We don't want territory, resources, or tribute. We don't want to rule you or control your governments. We just want to make sure that when the next existential threat appears, we're ready to deal with it. And if we refuse to accept human protection?" Young-ho shrugged. "Then you're on your own when the monsters come. But remember, we didn't ask to be your guardians. You called us for help. Now that we're here, we're going to do the job properly." On the rebuilt worlds of the Villani Republic, a new generation was growing up with a very different understanding of the galaxy. Children who had survived the Drakmar attack remembered hiding in underground shelters while their world burned, then emerging to find human ships filling the sky like metal angels. Major Hyejin, now commanding the garrison on Villani Prime, watched a group of young Villani playing in a park that had been rebuilt on the ruins of a Drakmar feeding ground. The children were acting out the human rescue, taking turns being Admiral Hyunsik and his officers. "They hero worship us," she observed to her aide, Lieutenant Wu Jin. "It's not entirely healthy." "Better than fearing us," Wu Jin replied. "At least they understand we're on their side." That wasn't true everywhere in the galaxy. Many species looked at humanity's military capabilities and saw a potential threat rather than protection. Trade agreements suddenly included clauses about human military access. Diplomatic meetings were held in systems far from human patrol routes. Some species began secretly developing weapons designed specifically to counter human advantages. Dr. Yoon Soo, now heading the Terran Threat Assessment Division, monitored these developments with professional interest. "They're preparing to fight us," she reported to Admiral Hyunsik during a secure briefing. "The Zenthari have developed new energy shields designed to stop kinetic weapons. The Mollusk Confederacy is working on biological agents that might affect human physiology." "Are they a threat?" Hyunsik asked. "Not really. Their weapons are designed to counter our current technology, but we've been adapting our equipment for decades. By the time they deploy countermeasures, we'll have moved on to new systems." "And if they actually attack us?" Dr. Yunsu smiled, grimly. "Then they'll learn why preparing to fight humans and actually fighting humans are very different things." The real test came 8 months later, when long-range scouts detected something new in the galactic rim. Captain Boram, now commanding her own deep space reconnaissance vessel, transmitted the first reports of massive artificial structures appearing near the edge of explored space. "They're not ships," she reported during the emergency briefing. "They're constructs. Each one is roughly the size of a small moon, and they're made of some kind of metal we don't recognize. They're consuming asteroids and building more of themselves." Admiral Hyunsik studied the sensor readings with growing concern. This looked like another extinction-level threat. Self-replicating machines with unlimited growth potential. Left unchecked, they could consume entire star systems to fuel their expansion. "Recommendations?" Captain Su Jin, now his chief of staff, didn't hesitate. "Same protocol as the Drakmar. Total elimination before they become too numerous to stop." "The other species?" "Already requesting emergency sessions and committee formations," Young-ho reported from his diplomatic post. Conservative estimates put their decision timeline at 6 to 8 months. Hyunsik nodded. 6 months of debate while a potentially galaxy-ending threat grew stronger by the day. This was exactly why humanity had maintained its military presence in deep space. "Signal the fleet," he ordered. "All available units to converge on the construct. Locations. Rules of engagement. Anything that looks artificial and self-replicating gets destroyed immediately." As human ships began moving toward the new threat, the galaxy watched with a mixture of relief and apprehension. Relief because someone was taking action against a potential disaster. Apprehension because that someone was humanity, and they had already proven they would do whatever was necessary to eliminate threats. Ambassador Young-ho addressed the Galactic Council one final time before the human fleet departed. "Some of you have asked whether humanity has the right to act as the galaxy's guardians, whether we have the authority to make life or death decisions for entire species." He paused, looking around the chamber at representatives from hundreds of worlds. "We don't claim that right or that authority, but we do claim the responsibility. When something threatens innocent life in this galaxy, we will act. We will act quickly, decisively, and with overwhelming force. If you don't like our methods, develop better ones. If you don't trust our judgment, make better decisions faster than we do." The human fleet jumped to hyperspace, leaving behind a galaxy that was finally beginning to understand its new reality. There were monsters in the dark spaces between stars, ancient evils, artificial intelligences, parasitic swarms, and worse things that hadn't been discovered yet. But there were also humans, and the monsters were starting to learn which group they should be more afraid of. Admiral Hyun-sik stood on the bridge of the Indomitable as his ship raced toward humanity's next war. Around him, his officers prepared for whatever they might find. Behind him, the combined might of human civilization followed, ready to face any threat that dared to threaten the innocent. The SOS had reached the Deathworlders, and they had responded with an armada. Now the galaxy would learn that when humans took on a responsibility, they kept it forever. The age of diplomatic solutions and committee meetings was over. The age of human guardianship had begun, whether the galaxy wanted it or not.